Hey everybody, and welcome to today's video in which we will see how we can create a shader for a car paint material. Now this video came directly as a request from one of the subscribers. He asked me how we can create a believable car material or car paint material. So let's see how I did this. First of all, I want to just show you what I have as a scene set up here. It's nothing too complex. I only have one plane. Also, you might notice that for the first time in this video, I'm using the 2017 version of 3ds Max, so some things might be a bit different, but nothing too much. Anyways, I have a plane, which is 1000 by 1000 centimeters. I have this teapot in the middle here, which has 12 segments and a turbo smooth on it. And I have a simple VRay light, which has a HDRI light applied to it to help me with the lighting of the scene. If you want to see how the light looks, all you can do is just press Alt-B, and then you use the environment background. That is going to take the data from the HDRI, which I have placed in the environment slot, which you can check by pressing the 8 on your keyboard. As you can see here, I have this thing pulled from here as an instance, and also if you want to see it or further control this thing, you can just make an instance in one of the free slots in your material editor. So let's put an instance over here so we can see. There we go. Now we have this image. If I double click on it, you can see that this is a simple forest HDRI image. In case you don't have a HDRI, feel free to go over to the Facebook group. There I've placed a couple of links to free sources for free HDRIs, so you can follow along with pretty much any other video that I use where I use HDRI. All right, so let's get back to our scene and see how we can create the shader. In order to be able to create the shader, we need to understand how this shader is actually supposed to look like. So for this, I've went ahead and I downloaded an image which has a car bonnet or car hub, which has the paint damaged. So as you can see, the top layer has been damaged, and you can see the underlying layer. This means that whenever you're looking at a car paint material, you're basically seeing a double layer. In some cases, maybe even a triple or quadruple layer of paint layered on top of itself. Now, the first layer is basically this part over here, which is underneath all of this damaged layer on the top. So if we take a look at here, we're going to see that this thing is actually not very reflective. It's rather glossy when you take a look at it. So let's start off with that. Let's create this look first. So I'm going to put this to the side. I'm going to go back to my camera so I can see my teapot. I'm going to press Shift F so I can frame it. There we go, like that. And now open up the material editor. Now, I know for a fact that I'm going to need to have multiple layers. So in order to get this, I'm going to go and convert this to a VRay blend material. It's going to ask me if I want to keep or discard the old material. I'm going to discard this one. I can actually keep it, but I actually had a bit of a problem for some reason. Max decided to give me some wrong or inaccurate results. So for this one, I'm actually going to discard the old material and start with a blank VRay blend material. So let's name it the blend material. Let's name it car paint. And now we need to have the base material. The base material is going to be our primary color. So for this, I'm going to go over here and call this base material. All right, now this is a very simple material. All you have to do is make this thing glossy. So drop down over here, and I'm going to go overboard to something like 0.5. We can probably get away with 0.7 even, but let's just go like this. So 0.5 on the glossiness, and we want to change the color. Now, for the color, we can go with blue, but for this tutorial, I'd rather go with green because it's easier to see it. The way to add the color is we can choose the diffuse, or we can go in here, and instead of choosing just a flat color, I'm going to create a fall off map. Now this fall off map is going to give me a bit of a different result. Namely, I can choose two colors and then mix them together by the angle that I'm looking at it. So since we're going to go with a green color, I'm going to click here, choose a green color that I like. I want to get a lighter color, more saturated, something like this. Copy the same color in the slot beneath it. Copy, click on it, and just make it a darker version of it. So increase the value like that. I'm going to leave the fall off type to perpendicular and the fall off direction. I'm not going to touch these two, but what I'm going to do here is go down to the mix curve and right click and Bezier corner. Convert this to a Bezier corner, which will give me the ability to control this fall off over here. And when it gets to around there, I guess, and there is no right or wrong value, but we want to just get this type of an arc here. All right, so once we have this, I can go back. And with this, now what I want to do is I actually want to get this result more to the sides or more to the edges. Also, the first thing that I should have done is here go into the reflect and make it very reflective. So there we go, because without the reflect, the reflection glossiness would be pointless to have. Another thing that I would like to do is take this reflective look and push it more towards the edges. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to go into the BRDF here, and with the 2017 version and well, the 3.6 version of VRay, by default this thing is set to microfacet GTR or the GGX. In case you have it to any of the other ones, switch over to the GGX, and here you have this tail fall off. Instead of keeping it at 2, increase it up to 5. This should help, as you can see now in the preview, this should help with giving us a more sharper look. So I'm going to close this and now go back to the car paint material. I'm going to press on the background so I can see what's happening here, and click on the base background and pull it in the base material. I want this thing as an instance in there. Awesome. All right, so now pull it on the teapot. And let's do a quick render and see how this thing is going to look like. So render the current frame. As we can see here, we have our render done, and it's a very, very diffused or a very glossy base, which is exactly what we were going after. So now comes the second part where we want to create the second layer, or we want to create the reflection coating. So for this, I'm going to go again back to our new basic parameter. For this thing, I'm going to choose a very dark color. So I'm actually going to go to almost black, something like 1. There we go. Using just black can give you some errors. So make it reflective. Again, very reflective. Almost to the end. So let's try 254. And for this thing, I don't actually have too much glossiness. I actually want the opposite. So let's just give it a slight 0.95, or actually let's go up to 98 with this thing. And very important thing here is that we want to make this thing very reflective. which means we want to turn off the Fresnel reflections. So turn off the Fresnel, and this will make it a very reflective surface. If I double click on it, you're going to see that this thing is going to act out basically like a chrome. Now the only thing that I can add in here is a bit of a noise to break up the perfection of the surface. So I can scroll down in the maps, and in the bump I can drop in either a cellular map, or I can drop in a noise, Burkhardt noise, pretty much anything to just break up this perfection of this the surface. I'm gonna go with a cellular for this thing. Now it looks a lot rippled. I don't want to have a black color, so let's go with something like grayish color like that. There we go, that's nice. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decrease the size of these ripples to something very small, like 0.01. That's still too big, so let's go even lower. Okay. This can work like this. The next thing that I want to do is decrease the blur to 0.2. I think this should help with the blurring. All right, and go back to the parent and really decrease this thing, because we just want to have a slight effect. We don't have this thing this strong. So let's try a bump of 1. Yeah, you see it's barely visible. So for this, I actually want to test it out. So I'm gonna take this thing and put it as a blend material over here in the coat materials. Go to an instance, and actually I want to rename this to reflection coating. All right, reflection coating. And I'm going to select just a small spot so I can see how strong that reflection coating is. So render it last. All right, and from what I can see, both the noise here from the from the reflection coating and the color are multiplied, and we can see that this thing is starting to get the result that we want. But from what I can see from this piece, the result here is too strong, and it should be, because at the moment the rate that it's mixing is this color. So it's taking this color and mixing it 125, so it's mixing 50%. I actually don't want it to mix like that, so I want to have the reflection coating to mix at a different angle. This means that I want to control this with a Fresnel. So I'm going to click here, choose fall off, and in the fall off here, I'm going to leave everything as it is by default, but I'm going to come down to the mix curve, and from here I'm going to add in a spot, or add in one controller point. I'm going to control this to a Bezier smooth, and I want to get the base color this thing and move it upwards a tiny bit, and move this thing down to be in line with it. So with this way, now I can control this side and get a slight angle up at around here. So I just want to make sure that both my starting point and this point are flush with each other, and they're not at the 0. So they're just above the 0. I'm going to go back one more time, and now I have this map for the reflection. So I'm going to call this reflection map, or reflection curve. All right, and now just sample a different place, something like this, and re-render. And as I can see here with the render spot that I have here, I pretty much have the base color coming from our base material, and the reflecting the reflection is coming from the reflecting coat. So now comes the interesting part. This is the minor details that you would probably see if you take a look at a car paint material during daylight from up close. Namely, this is what you would see. If you take a look at here, you're going to notice that down in the surface of the car paint material, you can see all of these little flakes in different colors. Now, the color of these flakes is, well, it's going to depend on the angle that you're looking at them. So how do we get this thing to look the same in our render, or how we can introduce that type of detail in our render? Well, for that, we can go to our main material here, and from here, simply I want to have another material over here, so another coat. But for this, I actually want to have it underneath the reflection coating. So I'm going to go and put this thing to number 2 and swap them. So now I have a none here and swap it here as well. So now I have a free slot over here. So I want to click in here, and now from here I want to choose a new node. The node that we are looking for is the pretty new node called VRay Stochastic Flakes material. Now, the VRay Stochastic Flakes material, and I'm really hoping I'm pronouncing this right, is a new material that was added, or a new node that was added in VRay 3.6. So if you're using an earlier version, you're not going to have it. So from here, as you can see, it's over there. Here we go. Choose this thing, and we get these parameters. Now, a short intro. The VRay Stochastic Flakes materials can be used to simulate car paint, snow, and other glittery materials. It works in a way that it's simulating at render time the effect of a large number of flakes scattered over the surface, which is ideal for what we need in our case. It's a very similar to what we had previously with the VRay Flakes material and VRay car paint material, but this material uses less memory and avoids the issues that you would get by with the previous materials where they had issues with tiling. So this is the superior version of it, if I may say it. So, all right, so let's see what are these options and what we can do with them. When you use the VRay Stochastic Flakes material, the first thing that you want to get clear is what kind of a Uvw mapping type are you going to use. If you have a model that has been unwrapped, then you can use the explicit Uvw channel, and choose the channel that you have the unwrap. Or if you don't have a Uvw unwrap for your model, like in this case, I don't have this thing unwrapped, and I really don't enjoy the idea of unwrapping this teapot now, what I can do is I can go over here in the mapping type, click on it, and switch over to the triplanar from object XYZ. Now the triplanar mapping is basically like planar mapping, and it's casting rays from each side, which in this case would be ideal. Once we set that, now we want to set the number of flakes here. I can start off with a high number of maybe something like 10,000. And from here, the second thing that I want to control is the highlight glossiness. Again, I'm going to go with something very glossy like we had, like 0.5 or 0.6. Actually, I think that we had a 0.6, well, let's go with 0.665. All right, so that should meet us in the middle. If I double click on it, it's going to show me how this thing looks like. I can see some small details or some small specks, but still our flake scale is too big. Now, what we want to do here is go over where it says flake scale and reduce this number. Now, another thing that you should know is that the flake scale is directly controlled or directly influenced by what kind of mapping type you choose. That's why I told you the first thing you want to choose is the mapping type. If you're using explicit UV channel, then a scale of 1 would be recommended because you can get a nice scale. But if you're using a triplanar object, then the number of flakes or the flake scale would have to be a very low setting, something like 0.05 or 0.01 or even less. And you're going to have to make the adjustments with the flake scale and the number of flakes. So with the flake scale, let's try with something as low as 0.01. Let's see if this thing is going to show up here. No, not really, but we're going to see this thing when we start to test render this thing. I'm not going to change the BRDF type. I'm not changing any of this. Oh, we have the blur. The blur angle basically controls the soft effect on the flakes. Higher values will produce softer results, while lower values will make the flakes sharper. Usually you would use values between 0.5 and up to like 8 or 9, but well, let's go with something like very in the lower parts here, because from what we saw in our image, we want to have those flakes really visible. So let's go with a blur angle of 1.5, and I want to get a bit more resolution in there, some quality, so I'm going to give it some subdivs. Let's go with 32 subdivisions. And with this, the next thing that I can change here as well, I'm not going to change anything else for that matter. I'm going to go back, and now I want to give it a small test and see where I'm sitting at the moment. So let's just choose one spotlight here and make a render. From the quick render, I can see all those little specks in there, but in reality we have to up the number. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to maybe even double to like 20,000 flakes. This should give us a lot more flakes. Now, here's the thing. If I take a look back at the image that we saw previously, from the color, you're going to notice something. All of these are not the same color. They have different colors. They have yellows, they have pinks, greens, so it has a lot of color in there. What we can do here to get this result to appear in our scene is we can color the flakes. By default, this thing is set to off. I can go and put it as a random hue, or I can control it with a map. But since I don't have a map, I'm going to go and use a random hue. And this is going to scatter different color of flakes. So again, I'm going to re-render this thing and see the difference now. Well, actually, I'm going to go and just do it to half of this side so we can compare it to the other side. So render. And from here, I can see that all of those white spots have been subdued a bit. They're not that visible, but again, the problem at the moment that I'm having is that this thing is way too reflective. It looks more like something that's chrome with all of those little specks in it. So the way to fix this is, again, we have to go back and find a way to control the color. At the moment, we are controlling this with the simple color, but I want to control this more firmly with a simple VRay color in here. So I'm going to go down to, again, to VRay and choose a VRay color. Now, I'm not going to change any of the other options for this thing. The only thing that I'm going to go down is the color here and just input a number that I would like here. So if I'm here, it's basically mixing at 50%. If I go down to 20 for value, you're going to see this thing is going a lot more to the black, which means the flakes are going to come in very, very mildly. So let's go and re-render this thing again. So render last. And if I take a look at this, now we have those flakes in our material, but the color is coming from the green. Now in all reality though, I probably should amp up this thing a bit higher. So let's mix it at 40. See how this thing would look. And as you can see, even when it's pre-building the light, you can see all of these colors like the reds, the blues, the greens. This means that all of that information is in our shader. So if I take a render and render out this thing on a high resolution, we will probably see all those little specks. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to render the whole thing and see where we stand at the moment. So render. And as the render is progressing, you can see all of those little specks that I was talking about. You can see the green, we have blues, we have browns, pretty much all the different hues. So let's give it a few minutes and let it clear out. And as soon as the render is finished, I can see that now I have my material all rendered out and looking good on this teapot. If I zoom in, I can see in here some remnants of the flakes. I can see it on the edges, but in this case it's really not that visible because the lighting scenario in this case, it's inside a darker forest of a sort, so we don't have direct lights which would help the small flakes pop up. But don't worry, in the next video we'll continue making a pearlescent version of this color, and that is where all of the flakes are really gonna pop up. So for now, that would be it. I hope you guys had fun, you managed to learn something new. If you do have any questions, leave them below. I will meet you in the comment section of the video. If you did enjoy the video, click the like button, and if you're not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.